The crowd went silent. Every camera, every whisper, every eye turned toward the small boy in braces, standing in the middle of the ballroom. Patrick Drake, the billionaire's disabled son, looked up at the black maid holding a tray and asked softly, "Ma'am, may I dance with you?" The music stopped. The room froze. No one dared to move. And from the balcony above, Jonathan Drake, the boy's father, watched in disbelief as the maid slowly set down her tray, took his son's trembling hand, and stepped onto the floor. That single dance would change all their lives forever. The air inside the ballroom felt thick. The band members looked at one another, unsure if they should keep playing. Every guest sat frozen, pretending to smile, but their eyes told another story. Some were shocked, some embarrassed, and some even angry. Sophia Martinez felt her legs shaking as she took the boy's hand. His small fingers gripped hers tightly, and his braces clicked with every tiny step. She didn't know how she found the courage to move, but something about his trembling smile pushed her forward. The piano player glanced at the conductor. Slowly, the music began again, softer this time, as if afraid to interrupt the moment. Patrick took a deep breath and looked up at Sophia. "I can't move fast," he said shyly. Sophia bent a little, her eyes kind. "That's all right, Patrick. We can go slow." She placed her free hand gently on his shoulder. The crowd leaned in, holding their breath. They had never seen the Drake boy smile. But now, as Sophia guided him through small, careful steps, a light spread across his face. Up on the balcony, Jonathan's hand tightened on the railing. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. For years, his son had refused to walk in public. Doctors, therapists, specialists, he had paid them all. But nothing worked. And now, this maid, someone who polished his floors, had done what no one else could. His chest felt heavy. He didn't know if it was anger, pride, or something else he couldn't name. Sophia moved slowly, her steps matching Patrick's rhythm. She didn't care about the eyes watching. She cared about the boy's small smile and the warmth in his hand. "Just breathe, Patrick," she whispered. "You're doing great." Patrick nodded, his lips curling into a shy grin. The band's melody grew stronger. A few guests clapped softly, but most stayed quiet. Jonathan's mother, seated near the front, whispered to the woman beside her, "This is humiliating. He should stop this nonsense." But Sophia heard Patrick laugh for the first time, a small laugh that made her eyes fill with tears. The boy took another shaky step, then another. His confidence grew. For a few short minutes, it didn't matter that he was wearing braces or that the world was watching. He was just a boy dancing, free from pity. When the music ended, Sophia knelt down so she could see him eye to eye. "You were amazing," she said softly. Patrick smiled proudly. "I didn't fall once." "You didn't," she said, smiling. "You were perfect." The room stayed silent. No one clapped. The sound of their breathing and the faint hum of the chandelier filled the space. Jonathan finally stepped forward from the balcony. His tall figure appeared above the stairs, his face unreadable. "Sophia," he called, his voice calm but heavy. The guests turned toward him. Patrick's smile disappeared. Sophia froze where she knelt. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. Jonathan began walking down the stairs. The sound of his shoes echoed across the floor. Every step made the silence deeper. When he reached the bottom, he looked at his son first. "Patrick," he said, "go sit with your grandmother." Patrick's voice shook. "Dad, please don't be angry. It was my idea." Jonathan didn't reply. His eyes shifted to Sophia. "A word," he said firmly. Sophia nodded and followed him through the wide golden doors that led out of the ballroom. The whispers began again behind them, loud enough to sting her ears. They stopped at the end of the long hallway. The music inside started again, covering the gossip that had already begun to spread. Jonathan turned sharply. His voice was low but full of pressure. "Do you realize what you just did?" Sophia held her hands together. Yes, sir, I danced with your son. In front of everyone, he said coldly. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed me. She looked down at the floor. I didn't mean to, sir. He asked me. You could have refused, Jonathan said. Sophia's voice trembled, but she kept it steady. How could I say no, sir? He just wanted someone to see him. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. He doesn't need sympathy. Sophia looked up at him then, her eyes calm and wet. No, sir. He needs love. Jonathan froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. For a moment, he couldn't find words. She took a slow breath. He's a child, sir. He doesn't care about how people see him. He just wants to feel human. Jonathan turned away and stared at the floor. His voice dropped. You're a maid. Stay in your place. Sophia nodded softly. Yes, sir, but the sadness in her eyes said more than words ever could. He started to walk away, then stopped halfway. Finish your shift, he said without turning. We'll talk tomorrow. Sophia watched him leave, his tall figure disappearing into the corridor. The air felt colder now, heavier. When she returned to the ballroom, the guests pretended to be busy again, laughing louder than before to cover what had just happened. Patrick sat quietly beside his grandmother, his eyes fixed on the floor. Sophia walked past him slowly. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough. He gave her a small nod, a silent thank you that she would remember forever. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dim, Sophia walked home under the quiet Texas sky. The streets were empty, and the sound of her shoes echoed softly. She thought about the boy's trembling smile, about how he held her hand as if she was someone important. She didn't know what would happen next, but deep inside, she knew something had changed. That one dance had touched a place in both their hearts that no one could take back. And somewhere in the mansion, behind the tall windows, Jonathan Drake sat alone in his study, replaying the same moment over and over again, wondering why it still wouldn't leave his mind. The Spawn 1-2, 1-2-1-2. The morning sun spread softly over the Drake mansion. The ballroom that had glowed with gold light the night before now looked quiet and lifeless. The flowers were gone, the chairs stacked, the marble floor polished again as if nothing had happened. But the memory of that dance still hung in the air like a secret no one dared to mention. Sophia Martinez stood in the servants' corridor, her uniform pressed, her hands folded in front of her. Her heart had not stopped racing since the night before. She barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Patrick's small smile and the cold expression on Jonathan Drake's face. She wanted to believe she did the right thing, but she also knew men like him didn't forgive mistakes easily. At 9 o'clock sharp, one of the house staff approached. Mr. Drake would like to see you in his office, the woman said softly. Sophia nodded. Thank you. As she walked through the long hallway, her shoes clicked softly against the marble. The house was silent, too silent, as if even the walls were waiting to hear what would happen next. Jonathan's office was upstairs, past the large portrait of his late wife, which always made Sophia stop for a second. The woman in the painting had kind eyes, almost like Patrick's. When Sophia reached the door, she paused and knocked gently. Come in, Jonathan's deep voice said from inside. She entered quietly. He was sitting behind a large wooden desk, a cup of coffee untouched beside him. Papers were scattered across the table, but it was clear he hadn't been working. His eyes were tired, darker than usual. Good morning, sir, Sophia said softly. Jonathan didn't look up at first. Good morning, Miss Martinez. Sit. She sat on the edge of the chair opposite him, her hands clasped together. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, the sound stretching between them. Finally, Jonathan lifted his gaze. Do you know why you're here? Sophia's voice was steady, but her fingers trembled slightly. Because of what happened last night. He leaned back in his chair. Yes, because of what happened last night. His eyes narrowed slightly. Do you understand the kind of attention that moment has brought? She nodded. Yes, sir. Reporters are calling, he continued. Guests are talking. Some people think I staged it for sympathy. Others think you tried to make a show of pity in my house. Sophia looked down. It wasn't a show, sir. It was just a dance. The boy wanted to be seen, and I couldn't turn away. Jonathan's voice was firm. You think I don't see my son? Sophia's eyes lifted slowly to meet his. I think you see his body, sir, but not his heart. His brow furrowed. Careful with your words, Miss Martinez. She nodded. Yes, sir. I mean no disrespect. But children can feel when love becomes a rule instead of comfort. Jonathan looked away for a moment. He stood, walked toward the tall window, and stared out at the garden. You think I don't love him, he said quietly. I think you love him so much that you're afraid to let him fall, she said. He turned to face her, his jaw tight. Do you know what it's like to watch your child suffer every day? Sophia shook her head. No, sir. But I know what it's like to see someone hide behind pain. He walked back to his desk, his voice lower now. Patrick has been through enough. The doctors said too much strain could harm him. Sophia's tone softened. And yet, last night, he moved more freely than I've ever seen him. He didn't look weak. He looked alive. Jonathan sat down again slowly. You speak boldly for someone in your position. Sophia folded her hands tightly. I speak only what I saw, sir. I meant no harm. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sunlight from the window reached across the desk, touching the edge of Jonathan's hand. He stared at it, as if the light itself had interrupted his thoughts. Then, unexpectedly, he said, Patrick has not smiled like that since his mother died. Sophia blinked. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know. He nodded slowly. You wouldn't have. No one mentions her anymore. I can't even bring myself to. His voice dropped lower, quieter. When she was gone, Patrick stopped talking, stopped eating. He refused to walk for months. I hired every specialist in this state. They said it was trauma. I believed I could fix him with control. But last night... He trailed off, shaking his head. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her tone gentle. Last night, he didn't need fixing. He needed someone to believe in him. Jonathan looked up at her, his eyes unreadable. You speak like you know my son better than I do. Sophia lowered her gaze. No, sir. I just listened when he spoke. The silence returned, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was softer, almost thoughtful. Jonathan took a long breath and said, You will continue working here. Sophia looked up, surprised. I will? Yes, he said. But from now on, you'll assist Patrick directly for the next 12 weeks. You'll help him with movement, with daily routines, with whatever he needs. The doctors will supervise. You'll be compensated fairly. Sophia hesitated. Sir, I don't want extra pay. I just want him to feel safe. Jonathan's eyes softened for the first time. That's not how this works, Miss Martinez. You'll take the offer. She nodded slowly. Yes, sir. He stood again, walking to the window. One more thing, he said quietly. Whatever happened last night, whatever connection he felt, keep it private. I don't want the press using my son's life for stories. Sophia rose from her chair. Understood, sir. Jonathan turned slightly, his voice lower. You're different from most people in this house. You don't seem to fear me. Sophia gave a faint smile. Fear doesn't help children heal, sir. Patience does. For the first time, a small trace of a smile crossed Jonathan's face, brief and tired. Go on, then, he said. Patrick is in the garden. He's been waiting for you since morning. Sophia nodded and turned to leave. When she stepped outside, she saw Patrick sitting near the fountain, the sunlight falling across his shoulders. He looked up and waved. Hi, Sophia, he said cheerfully. Dad said I can walk with you today. Her heart warmed. He did? Patrick nodded, smiling. I think he's changing. Sophia smiled softly. Maybe we all are. and as she helped him stand, the sound of his braces clicking against the stone path filled the quiet air, a gentle rhythm of hope beginning to grow inside the Drake mansion. The morning light poured gently into the Drake mansion garden. Birds rested on the fence, the fountain sparkled in the middle, and for the first time in a long while, laughter could be heard instead of silence. Sophia Martinez sat on the stone bench near the rose bushes, watching Patrick Drake balance on the smooth path between the hedges. His braces clicked softly with every step, his arms spread wide as if he were walking on air. "Slowly, Patrick," Sophia said gently. "Don't rush it." "I'm fine," he said proudly, grinning. "See, I didn't fall." Sophia clapped softly. "You did great, but the goal isn't to rush. The goal is to move without fear." Patrick stopped and looked at her. "You always say that, Sophia." She smiled. "Because it's true. The body listens when the heart feels safe." Patrick tilted his head. "That sounds like something Mom used to say." Her smile faded slightly. "She was a kind woman, wasn't she?" Patrick nodded. "I don't remember much, but Dad says she loved music. She used to dance with me, even when I was too small to walk." Sophia's eyes softened. "Then I think she'd be proud of you right now." Patrick smiled again and looked at the sky. "I hope she can see me." From the balcony above the garden, Jonathan Drake watched quietly, his hands resting on the railing. He didn't want to interrupt. There was something about the way Sophia spoke to his son that made him feel small, almost humbled. She didn't treat Patrick like a patient or a fragile child. She treated him like a person who still had dreams. He took a slow sip of his coffee, eyes still fixed on them. He noticed the way Patrick's face lit up whenever Sophia smiled, the way she patiently waited when he stumbled, and the way she celebrated every small step as if it was a victory. Inside the house, the staff moved quietly. They had all seen the change, too. Patrick laughed more now. The boy who once stayed locked in his room now wanted to go outside, to talk, to learn. Around noon, Jonathan came down and walked into the garden. Sophia stood quickly when she saw him. "Good afternoon, sir," she said respectfully. Jonathan nodded. "How's he doing?" Sophia smiled faintly. "Better than yesterday. He's learning to trust his legs again." Patrick looked up, his face bright. "Dad, look. I walked all the way from the gate to the fountain without stopping." Jonathan's lips pressed together, but his voice was calm. "I saw, son. I'm proud of you." Patrick's smile widened, and he looked at Sophia as if to say, "See?" he noticed. Jonathan turned to Sophia. "Walk with me," he said. She nodded and followed him along the garden path. The air smelled of roses and wet grass. "I didn't expect this much progress," Jonathan said quietly. "The doctors said he might never walk freely." Sophia clasped her hands in front of her. "Sometimes, sir, healing starts when people stop treating you like you're broken." He looked at her, his voice thoughtful. "You speak as if you've seen that before." She nodded softly. "My younger brother was born with a spine condition. People said he'd never stand, but my mother made him believe he could. One day, he proved them wrong." Jonathan's expression softened. "Where is he now?" Sophia looked down. "He passed away 3 years ago." He paused, regret in his eyes. "I'm sorry." She smiled faintly. "It's all right, sir. He taught me something before he died. He said people don't always need saving. They just need someone to stand beside them until they remember how strong they are." Jonathan didn't reply, but her words lingered in his mind. That evening, as the sun faded, Jonathan called for Patrick to rest. The boy obeyed, but before leaving, he turned to Sophia. "Will you read me a story tonight?" Sophia smiled. "Of course, Patrick." When Patrick left, Jonathan stood quietly by the window. The orange light from the sunset touched his face. "You've changed this house," he said. Sophia looked surprised. "Sir?" He turned toward her. Patrick laughs again. "The staff talks freely. Even I feel different." She smiled softly. "Maybe your house just needed a little warmth, sir." He nodded slowly. Perhaps. There was a short silence before he asked, "Do you ever miss your home, Sophia?" She nodded. "Every day. But sometimes, life takes us where we're needed, not where we planned to be." Jonathan studied her face for a moment, then said quietly, "You remind me of my wife." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand. "No, I mean it." She had that same calmness, the same ability to bring peace where there was chaos. She lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. He walked closer to the window, his tone distant. "When she died, I built walls around this house. I thought silence was control, but it only buried everything alive." Sophia spoke gently. "Silence can protect, sir, but it can also isolate." Jonathan nodded slowly, then turned back to her. "Keep doing what you're doing for Patrick. Don't let anyone in this house stop you." Sophia bowed her head slightly. "Yes, sir." Later that night, Sophia walked down the long hallway toward Patrick's room. The lights were dim, and the air carried the faint smell of lavender. She found Patrick sitting on his bed with a small book in his lap. "You ready for your story?" she asked softly. He nodded eagerly. "It's about a bird that couldn't fly," he said. Sophia sat beside him and opened the book. "Then it's a story worth reading." As she read, Patrick leaned against her shoulder, his eyes slowly closing. The sound of her voice filled the room with calm. When she looked up, Jonathan was standing quietly by the doorway, watching. He didn't speak, but there was something different in his face, something softer. After a moment, he turned and left, closing the door gently behind him. Sophia looked down at Patrick, asleep now, his braces lying beside the bed. She brushed his hair gently and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." In his study, Jonathan poured himself a glass of water and sat in silence. He remembered Sophia's words, "Healing starts when people stop treating you like they're broken." He looked around at the large empty room, the cold furniture, the framed photos that looked more like decorations than memories. For the first time, he realized how lonely the mansion had become. The sound of laughter from the hallway reached his ears, Patrick's laugh. Jonathan closed his eyes, letting it echo through the quiet. It was the first sound of hope he had heard in years. And as the night settled over Texas, both Jonathan and Sophia lay awake in their separate rooms, unaware that something new had already begun between them, something neither money nor fear could control. The next few weeks passed slowly inside the Drake mansion. The air that once carried silence now carried laughter, the soft sound of piano keys, and the quiet voice of a boy learning to believe again. Every morning, Sophia met Patrick in the garden. They practiced walking, balancing, and even small dance steps. The more they worked together, the more confident he became. The boy who once hid from the world now wanted to face it. But not everyone was happy about it. The whispers started among the house staff first. Then they spread to the guests who visited Jonathan Drake's home, and soon the story reached the city papers. "They say the maid spends too much time with the boy," one worker murmured in the kitchen. "I heard Mr. Drake lets her talk back to him," another replied. Someone else added, "It's strange, isn't it? A billionaire letting a maid teach his son to dance." Sophia heard the whispers but kept quiet. She focused on her work, her mind fixed only on Patrick's smile, but she could feel the tension in the air. Every hallway she walked down seemed colder, every glance felt heavier. One evening, after a long day of practice, Sophia helped Patrick into his wheelchair and guided him toward the piano room. The boy pressed a few keys, his face glowing. "Dad said I can play during the next charity event," Patrick said proudly. "He said you'll help me practice." Sophia smiled. "Of course I will, Patrick. You'll make him proud." Jonathan entered the room just then, still wearing his dark blue suit from a meeting. His expression softened as he saw them together. "You two seem busy." Patrick grinned. "Sophia says I have rhythm, Dad. I think I might be a musician someday." Jonathan smiled faintly. "Then I'll buy you a piano of your own." Sophia looked at him. He doesn't need a new piano, sir. He just needs your time." Her voice was soft, but it struck him deeply. For a second, he didn't respond. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right. Maybe I do." Patrick's eyes brightened. "Can we practice together tomorrow, Dad?" Jonathan hesitated. "Tomorrow, I have meetings." Sophia looked at Patrick. "Then maybe the next day," she said gently. Jonathan glanced at her, realizing she had just saved him from disappointing his son again. "Yes," he said quietly. "The next day." That night, after Patrick went to sleep, Jonathan sat alone in his study. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from his assistant. One of them read, "Sir, there are questions in the press about the maid's role in your household. Should we release a statement?" He sighed and leaned back in his chair. The media had already begun twisting things, printing pictures from the gala, writing headlines like, "Billionaire's maid changes his son's life," and "Too close for comfort." Jonathan closed his eyes. He hated that the world couldn't see sincerity without suspicion. The next morning, he called Sophia to his office. She walked in, her eyes tired but calm. "You asked to see me, sir?" He nodded and held up a newspaper. "You've seen this?" She glanced at the front page. Her picture was there, standing beside Patrick, smiling. The headline read, "The Mystery Woman in the Drake Mansion." Sophia's voice was steady. "Yes, sir. I saw it." Jonathan set the paper down. "They're twisting everything." "I know," she said quietly. "But we can't control what people say." He rubbed his temple. "They're attacking you because of me. Because of that dance." Sophia took a slow breath. "Then let them talk, sir. The truth doesn't need defending." Jonathan looked at her, surprised by her calm. "You're not afraid?" She shook her head. "No, sir. Fear doesn't help a child walk again." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jonathan said quietly, "Thank you for not running away." Sophia smiled faintly. "I came here to work, sir. Not to quit when things get hard." Later that day, Patrick overheard some of the staff whispering near the staircase. "They say Sophia's getting too close," one said. "Mr. Drake should send her away." Patrick clenched his fists and shouted, "Don't say that!" The maids froze. The boy's voice echoed through the hall. Jonathan appeared almost instantly, his tone firm. "What's going on here?" The workers stuttered. "Nothing, sir. Just talking." Patrick's face was red with anger. "They were saying bad things about Sophia." Jonathan looked at the staff coldly. "If I hear another word like that, you can all leave by morning." The room went silent. The maids lowered their heads and left quietly. Jonathan turned to Patrick. "You shouldn't raise your voice." Patrick's eyes filled with tears. "They want to take her away, Dad." Jonathan's expression softened. "No one is taking her away." Sophia arrived just then, hearing the end of the conversation. "Patrick," she said gently, kneeling beside him, "people talk when they don't understand kindness, but we don't fight them with anger, we fight with peace." Patrick nodded slowly. Jonathan watched her, amazed by her patience. Later that evening, Jonathan invited Sophia to his study. She hesitated at the door. "Is everything all right, sir?" He nodded. "Sit, please." When she sat, he poured her a glass of water and handed it to her. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Her brows furrowed. "For what, sir?" "For not protecting you sooner," he said. "You've done more for my son than anyone else ever has, and I let gossip take control of the story." Sophia smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything, sir. I just did what felt right." Jonathan sighed. "You remind me of something I forgot long ago." "What's that?" she asked. "That money can build houses, but it can't build peace." For the first time since she started working there, Sophia saw him not as a billionaire, but as a father trying to find his way back to his son. A quiet knock came at the door. Patrick peeked in, smiling. "Dad, can I stay here a little?" Jonathan looked at Sophia, then nodded. "Of course, son." Patrick ran to Sophia's side and leaned against her arm. Can you read to us?" She laughed softly. "Both of you?" Jonathan smiled. "Why not?" Sophia opened the same storybook she always read to Patrick. Her voice filled the room, calm and warm. As she read, Patrick drifted off to sleep on the couch. Jonathan watched her in silence. The flicker of the lamp reflected in her eyes, and for a moment the house felt like a home again. When she finished, she looked up. "He's asleep," she whispered. Jonathan nodded. "Leave him. He's safe here." As she stood to leave, Jonathan said quietly, "Sophia, if anyone threatens you again, come to me directly." She turned to him. "Thank you, sir." Their eyes met for a moment too long, a silence filled with things neither of them could say. Then Sophia looked away and whispered, "Good night, Mr. Drake." Jonathan watched her walk out of the room. He felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years: respect, admiration, and something far deeper that he wasn't ready to name. Outside, the wind swept softly through the Texas night, and for the first time, the mansion didn't feel lonely anymore. By the next week, the whispers had turned into headlines. The local news stations played the story again and again, calling it "The Maid and the Billionaire's Secret Bond." Some said Sophia had overstepped her role. Others said Jonathan Drake was hiding something. And every time a new article appeared, it felt like another knife cutting through her peace. Sophia sat quietly in her small room that night, her eyes on the flickering light from the hallway. The house that once felt like a place of healing now felt like a cage. She had only wanted to help Patrick, but now her name was being dragged through lies. A soft knock came on her door. "Come in," she said gently. Patrick rolled in with his braces on, holding a folded newspaper in his hand. His face looked worried. "Sophia, why are they saying these things?" She took the paper from him and set it aside. "People fear what they don't understand, Patrick." "But they're saying Dad might fire you," he said, his voice trembling. "Please tell me it's not true." Sophia smiled sadly. "I don't know, sweetheart, but if it happens, I want you to remember one thing: our time together mattered. You made me proud every single day." Patrick's eyes filled with tears. "You're not leaving." She touched his hand gently. "I don't want to. But sometimes life decides before we do." At that moment, Jonathan stood outside the door, hearing everything. His heart ached at the sound of his son's voice. He pushed the door open slowly. Patrick looked up. "Dad, please, tell her she's not leaving." Jonathan walked in, his face tired but calm. "No one is leaving," he said softly. Sophia rose to her feet. "Sir, the news." "I've seen it," Jonathan interrupted. "They don't know the truth, but I do." She hesitated. "Sir, maybe I should go until it settles." He shook his head. "No. If you leave now, they win. And my son loses the one person who helped him find his strength." Patrick's eyes brightened. "See, Sophia? He said you're staying." Jonathan gave her a faint smile. "You've done more good here than anyone ever has. I won't let the world twist that." The next morning, Jonathan called his assistant. "Arrange a press conference," he said. The woman on the phone sounded nervous. "Sir, are you sure? The media is vicious right now." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "It's time to set the record straight." By noon, reporters crowded the steps of the Drake mansion. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed in every direction, and the air buzzed with noise. Sophia stood behind the curtains inside, her heart beating fast. Patrick sat beside her, holding her hand. "Are you scared?" he asked. She nodded. "A little." Patrick smiled softly. "Don't be. You taught me to be brave. Now it's your turn." Jonathan walked out onto the steps, his face serious but calm. The noise quieted instantly. "Good afternoon," he said. His deep voice carried across the courtyard. "I know there have been many stories about my family and my staff. I will speak only once, and I will speak the truth." He paused, looking straight into the cameras, Months ago, my son Patrick stopped walking, stopped smiling, stopped believing in himself. I hired doctors, therapists, and teachers, but none of them could reach him. Then one day, someone did. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the door. Sophia Martinez is not just a maid. She is a woman who saw my son when the rest of us only saw his illness. She gave him courage, not pity. She gave him hope when all we had left was fear. The reporters scribbled quickly, whispering to each other. Jonathan's voice grew stronger. That night, at the gala, when my son asked her to dance, she could have refused, but she didn't, because she saw a child asking to be human again, not a billionaire's son seeking attention. He paused, the crowd completely silent. If standing beside someone in their weakness is a scandal, he said firmly, then I will gladly be guilty. The reporters' flashes began again, but this time the tone had changed. Some even lowered their cameras. From behind the curtains, Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She had never expected him to defend her so openly. When Jonathan finished, he stepped back and opened the door for Sophia. "Come," he said quietly. "You deserve to be seen." Sophia hesitated for a moment, then stepped out into the sunlight. Patrick rolled out behind her, his smile wide. The cameras clicked rapidly, but for once, Sophia didn't lower her head. She stood tall beside Jonathan and Patrick, her hands clasped gently in front of her. Patrick looked up at the reporters. "She's my friend," he said proudly. "She helped me walk again." The crowd went silent for a moment. Then someone in the back started clapping, and slowly others followed. It wasn't the sound of pity, but of respect. That evening, the headlines changed. Billionaire defends maid who helped heal his son. The same voices that once whispered lies now spoke words of praise. But for Sophia, none of that mattered. What mattered was the look on Patrick's face when he walked across the living room that night without holding her hand. Jonathan watched from the corner, his eyes wet. "You did it, Patrick." Patrick smiled. "We did it, Dad." Sophia stood quietly near the piano, her hands clasped. Jonathan turned to her. "You've given us something money can't buy," he said softly. She smiled. "I only gave him what every child deserves, belief." He nodded. "And what about you, Sophia? What do you deserve?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Peace, sir. Just peace." Jonathan's gaze softened. "Then I hope you find it here." Days later, the mansion felt lighter. Patrick laughed often. The staff smiled again. Even the garden seemed brighter. One evening, as the sun began to set, Patrick sat at the piano, playing a simple melody Sophia had taught him. Jonathan and Sophia stood nearby, watching quietly. Patrick looked up and grinned. "Sophia, this is our song." She laughed softly. "Then keep playing it, Patrick." Jonathan turned to her. "He'll never forget you." Sophia looked back at him. "Neither will you, sir." He smiled faintly. "You're right." The last notes from the piano echoed softly through the room, warm and full of life. For the first time in years, the Drake mansion didn't feel like a place of power. It felt like a home. Sophia looked around the glowing room, her heart calm. She had come to clean floors, but instead she had helped clean hearts. And though she didn't know what the future held, she knew one thing for sure, that one dance had changed everything. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that kindness can heal places medicine never could, and love can speak louder than power or pride. A simple dance between a maid and a boy became a lesson for an entire world, that no heart is too broken to begin again. If this story touched you, don't scroll away just yet. Please take a second to like this video, subscribe for more emotional true life stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that heal, inspire, and remind us that humanity still lives in all of us.